Well, I mean, my own I never thought I'd become a head, but I only became a head because I saw people above me not doing it very well. And that was why I decided to become a head.
That reminds me, I was sent on a Cosmos course. Do you remember those? How to do the timetable up in Llandudno. And I was climbing up this big hill in Llandudno with these men, and I was listening to them, and I thought, I think I could do that. And I might even do it a little bit better.
I mean, I'd only been a deputy in the school for just over 2.5 years, and my head was retiring. And I didn't feel myself ready for it. But it was actually the thing of, was this the sort of school that I would want to be a head in? And the answer to that was yes. And then after about 2-3 weeks thinking and talking to people, then I decided to go for it. So it wasn't something, and I'd never actually thought I would go for headship. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing.
I mean, I didn't actually want to be a teacher, I don't think. So, in fact, I didn't become a teacher until I was 28. You know, I came through a period of educational time when social justice was very high on the agenda and being really influenced by people who were speaking out. So, I mean, my early days were much more about just enjoying the thrill of being a teacher and actually not thinking about promotion in the same way. For me, it wasn't a question of deciding to be ahead and getting there as fast as you could. There were people who did it, but it was a much more gradual process.
Now I'm ahead, it's the best job in the world.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Well, I didn't have that ultimate kind of game plan. I didn't really understand why people did headship. I saw it as an undoable job. I didn't really want the ultimate responsibility. I'd been deputy for 5.5 years in a school and had a very good training alongside an excellent head teacher. And people kept on saying to me, so when are you going for headship? When are you going for headship? And I always had an excuse, waiting for maybe, you know, well, Ofsted's coming, so I want to wait until after Ofsted, or I want to wait. And it got to the stage where I thought people would think I had special needs if I didn't go for headship. So I kind of went for a school that I knew in the area, was near to where I lived. I knew the community, I knew the deputy, and really wanted it. And
I've never worked with a female head.
Really?
In all my teaching career, 30-odd years in London, have always been male heads, strongly male-dominated senior leadership teams, and I might have been the lone woman moving up and thinking, a bit like Carissa, I think I could do this and perhaps do it better, which may be going to headship.
I mean, I don't want to sort of get into the notion of women doing it better or men, because I think we do it differently. Yes. But I do think when I moved to a secondary school in this large council estate, and we had a wonderful head, but it was a senior mistress, as they were called in those days, who showed me that because of the way I was in that school doing special needs, that I actually could influence. And it was what she said to me on 1 or 2 occasions that made me realise what I was doing was actually making a difference. You suddenly realise you're more capable than you perhaps realised you were.
I mean, I can remember when, you know, the head was in the study, or as he would then call it, you know, and you never saw them. You know, I actually, my first head I saw twice, and what I saw I didn't particularly sort of, you know, take in or anything, but I would never have thought of knocking on his door or sort of going in, or even, I didn't even know how you made an appointment to get to see this chap.
When I went for my first deputy headship back in the 70s, the male head said, what I want is a strong woman to be in charge of the girls' toilets. Yes, I was so shocked that I just walked out the door and thought, if that's the stereotype that, you know, we've got a lot of work to do here.
But I can remember going for interviews and being put off by that and thinking, I'm parking leadership for a while because I really don't want to deal with some of those. I don't want to be in charge of girls' toilets. You know, I want to be able to influence learning.
But that's awful, isn't it? To be put off leadership because that's what you think you're going to be doing.
Yes, but that's what I would have been doing, you know.
But I had a very totally different experience. I went to a girls' school and I went in as a probationary teacher, and the mentoring was done. Every couple of weeks I met with the head. He was really keen to see how I was.
And she was,
it was really enlightening, and she was so supportive and encouraging. A woman.
Yes.
I mean, I remember her being very well dressed and immaculate in her presentation, but she also had that personnel, nurturing role, and very influential in my thinking. So some of what I've tried to model is some actually went right back to...
I kind of struggled with that because I made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to be a replica of the head that I'd worked with for the last 5.5 years. And did I have the confidence to be me and recreate headship in the way that I want to take it forward? And I decided to do that. And I think that because you're so many hours in the job, and you're there, you can't really impersonate anybody. You've got to be you. And I just felt that I just needed to be me. So even if I looked very and sounded or did things that are quite unconventional, not very, but, didn't kind of fit that archetypal A-line skirt, twin set pearls, American tan tights, and just did it in my way, then that was going to be okay. That was going to be good.
I remember waking up very early in the morning, and my husband thought, "Oh my God, I've lost a wife. She's taken on this job," and I felt a great sense of responsibility.
I think it's sort of walking down the path on the first day and realising that there is a kind of ownership thing. They own you, at that point. That school is what you're all about. I think one of the first frightening things is just doing your first staff meeting, and the way in which you know that first meeting is going to be a marker for the kind of expectation they're going to have of you. And I don't think you're ever really quite prepared for the energy you need to put into that. And then the first assembly, and the kids are all there looking at you.
I think that's for me, that was what it was. It was feeling immensely proud. And thinking this is something I really want to do well. And all that expectancy from the parents, the governors, the staff and the students. And the students are saying, "So what are you going to do, Miss?"
I remember driving home at 10:30 at night when I just got the job and thinking, what have I done? And I was a single parent too, and I thought, I've got to make arrangements for my child, and I've got this new school I know nothing about. When I went in, I discovered a whole load of huts that no one had showed me on my first visit, and no desks, and I had to... And then I just remember that first staff meeting, and I inherited a school that was very streamed. And when I looked at the names of the classes, the bottom two classes were Neptune and Uranus, and Mercury. And I went in to the staff meeting, and I thought, right, this is the message. And I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of those names, and we're going to de-stream this school.
But nobody, no training programme prepares you for the importance of that first meeting where you're, if you like, setting out.
And it still doesn't to this day,
does it?
I don't think any training at the MPQH doesn't prepare you for what headship is all about. It can give you sort of a sort of very bare bones to hang things on, but it doesn't prepare you for that first staff meeting, the first assembly.
Or going home and sharing, my husband, my kids, how was it? All right, just sort of going back up to the bedroom, sort of screaming, I think that's sort of, the enormity of it all just suddenly hits you when you're actually doing it.
It did actually physically affect me in the first few weeks and months, and I think I felt another sense of responsibility because when I was appointed, that was in 1993, I think a newspaper contacted me and said I was the first Muslim female head in the country. So that was exciting in one way, but again it added another sense of responsibility.
And a huge burden.
And you feel you're not only doing it for yourself, as a head, but you're doing it for other possibly Muslim women who may be coming forward, and so you've got to make it very successful. You can't be just as good as, you've got to be better.
I totally understand that, can relate to that for obvious reasons. And I do feel a sense of responsibility to the community because I'm a head teacher in an area, in a borough that I grew up in. And so I've come through from primary, secondary, lived in the area. And so there are people who will sometimes say to their children, she's a head teacher, in that aspirational kind of way. So I do feel that, yes, it's higher profile. And so therefore, if you do make mistakes, they are kind of amplified.
But when I remember when I took over headship, I was a female head with 4 male deputies who'd all gone for the job and hadn't got it. And I went into a very difficult situation because I felt, my perception was that the male deputies were working against what I was wanting to achieve. So what I decided to do was to bypass that layer of management and to go directly to the staff and to some extent marginalise my deputies, I think, for a couple of years until they actually moved on, and that was my experience.
But the first, you know, you talked about physically affecting you in the first year or so. I think the sleep deprivation, because I would do the thing of, I'd go to sleep, be absolutely exhausted, 4:30 in the morning.
Common.
And 50 million things going through my head. And it's some of it is absolute rubbish because you're just replaying things that you've already done. But a lot of it is strategic. That is, you know, that's your kind of leadership team meeting, but it's all happening in your head.
The biggest release for me was walking through the front door. I had a young family at that stage, and I couldn't think about school. You know, I had to physically.
Absolutely.
That's right, and it was good because I had to. There was a very, you know, there was a cut-off point for me.
My children set the ground rules for my behaviour when I came home, in terms of, you know, you are not ahead when you come through the door. That was really quite important.
Don't sound
you know,
like a head.
Don't sound like a head. You are mummy, you know, whatever. That's what you need to be, and that I think was really. It sort of just grounded you in a sense of reality, really, and really.
I mean, I don't know whether any of us have been in the position. I was a deputy in the same school that I went as a head. And that transition is actually quite interesting because as a deputy you can be quite informal, and I'm still quite informal as a head, but you do physically have to stop yourself doing some of the things that you really enjoyed, which was sitting very informally with people, because it can be seen as favouritism and so on. So stepping back a little bit, there's a whole euphoria when I was appointed, but then the enormity of the job hits you, and then you think, well, there's certain things I can't do now.
I think if you become like a martyr and say it's a lonely position, I think that's not a helpful model. I could not have survived, I don't know about any of you, I couldn't have survived without my team. And this notion that you think, you know, I'm all alone, and you know, the buck stops you. You needn't be alone. I mean, obviously you have to take the supreme accountability, but in fact you can share quite a lot if you're that way inclined. I remember a few years ago getting a serious backache. I mean, I don't know if it was imagined or not, but and I symbolised and thought, you know, sometimes I feel like I'm everybody's mother.
Yes.
Do you know, and there seemed to be a time in the school, maybe I wasn't doing the job so well, maybe I don't know, I don't want to go into the detail, but I remember going in thinking, I feel weighed down, and I thought, I can't go on like this, and I think that's where I made the decision that I'd have to share the load more.
But I do think how you create that team around you, and all of the teams in your school, really, really does provide enormous opportunities to do lots of things with headship, and getting that right becomes a priority as much as anything else.
But that's also about trust, isn't it?
Yes.
Because everyone trusts the head.
Yes.
And as a head, you have to trust everyone else, and you have to trust if you devolve whatever you want being done, that they're actually going to do it.
And in fact, you actually find that there's quite a broad base of skills that you perhaps didn't know were there, and then they emerge, and then you say to that person, you're good at this, do you want to take that on? And that's how you develop people.
And I bet all of us here have spent years building and developing our teams to the positions we're in now, and we didn't inherit that.
I've argued that every time a head is appointed, they should have an entitlement to a coach or a mentor for at least a year, a bit like, you know, they're driving and stuff.
Because every year for the first 3 years brings a different issue.
I just think, exactly, but I think that should be built in, because, you know, if the head fails, it's an incredibly painful process for the school, the youngsters, the stuff, at the expense of it, having to, you know, and it doesn't do anyone any good. Whereas if you give someone the mentor or the coach from the beginning, and everyone has to have it, and you can't say, I don't want it, because there's some heads who say, oh, I don't need someone. They want to do it.
I mentor someone, and I think it's a valuable experience for the person I mentor, and also for the person, you know, it's a two-way conversation all the time.
It's very, very easy, isn't it, to get into your office and put the email on and just sit there. And I have to consciously look at my diary and think, get out and walk. You have to find numerous opportunities to be available and approachable. You can't say, I'm approachable, but shut your door. Would you agree? I think you've really got to
I mean, I
find
still
ways
teach, and that's very important for me. I teach a bottom Year 10 maths group, because I think if I'm going to, we've got a lot of special needs in the school, and if I can't deliver, then I think why should I expect staff to?
I think out of my 13 years of headship, I taught for 11 years, and I was very adamant. When I first started, it was really sending a very important message to staff and so on. And then to some extent, it also became a luxury to be in that classroom because there were other calls on my time. And it was something I actually felt very lost when I didn't weekly go into a classroom. But at the change of every lesson, I will come out of my office. I will be on this bridge that we've got where all the students are moving. I will have lunch every day with students. There are other ways for you to make sure that you are engaged within the school.
It's been proven time and time again, isn't it, that women are very good at multitasking, and that's one of the skills that we do have. Because you can put the washing on and you can do the ironing, drink a cup of coffee and answer the phone all at the same time, and those skills you take to headship as well.
You see, I think multitasking isn't just about doing things, it's also being comfortable in the roles you take on. So we become much better, it's almost like acting, but of course what you have to be is really genuine. You can't act it, you've got to believe it. Does that make sense?
Most definitely, and again I made that decision that I couldn't do consecutive roles, so I can't be Karen the mother, Karen the head. I actually have to merge it all. So what's indicative of that is that my diary is not, I don't have a business diary and a personal diary. I have to merge it.
Yeah, the ability to say no to things and doing things at your own pace rather than what's expected. I mean, at the moment, certainly in secondary, the actual initiative overload with the Key Stage 3 curriculum, 14 to 19, changes in GCSE, it's unbelievably complex at the moment. But to do it well, you've got to strategically plan it. So I think being able to say, okay, we're going to concentrate on this now and control things for your own self and for your own staff.
I think women in general think, should I go for headship, and then have that self-doubt. Even though they've got a lot of confidence, they have self-doubt, which makes them stop them going for headship. And I think that's an issue.
Or thinking they need to know how to do the job before they're in the job. Whereas most men I work with think they'll learn on the job, or they can tell somebody else what they want done and that other person will do it.
Sometimes when you go for a position of headship, or even as a teacher, parents sometimes like to see a man. Governors sometimes like to see a man in that type of position. I think they feel that there is a kind of a figurehead that a man will be able to portray that perhaps a woman wouldn't be able to portray in the same way.
Particularly in tough schools. I do have to say there is, can a woman actually deal with this very tough environment?
Have you been called love?
Oh, I've been called lots of things.
The love one does it for me.
Yeah, I think during my interview, one of my governors asked me if I would be able to do the job with these nails. Yeah, entirely not relevant.
I think in terms of being role models, I expect we all work 60 or 70 hours a week.
Yeah.
So to other female colleagues, and I have 2 female deputies, you present the role model that you do have a work-work balance and not a work-life balance because you're working so many hours. So in a sense, your younger staff, female staff, will say, well, look how hard the head works. She's always working that many. And that can be
made to me was when I was appointed as a head, and if you remember, I was a deputy in the school. One of the women there who had a family said, "Bushra, isn't it nice to see a head who's got a family? And we can see that you balance it, you talk about your children and you're involved in activities, and that's good for us to see." I mean, I've got a deputy now who has got potential for headship, certainly she has. She was a bit reluctant to look at the MPQ8 because of her family commitments and so on. She's got a young child, but I have been quite proactive in terms of encouraging. She's now halfway through that, and we've now discussion about what she's going to do when she gets the MPQ8.
But female members of staff still, I think, I was quite interested. Somebody was coming to talk to me a couple of weeks ago about the fact she was in the early stages of pregnancy. And, I thought that was absolutely fantastic, So you leap up, big hugs, and it's all very exciting. Oh my gosh, I was so concerned about coming to talk to you about this. There's still all of those hesitations and barriers. And I think it's also about you know, working with people to show them that there are other alternatives, that, you know, you can do this aspect of your career whilst you've got children, which will build up on your skill profile, you know, still enable you to sort of enter fully into sort of the profession.
I think women feel they need to make a decision to either do one or the other, when in fact we've proved time and time again that we can do both.
I love the role of headship. I love doing it. I love interacting with the children. I love interacting with the staff. But I tell you where the issue for me is. It's when you're then taken to an employment tribunal for something that's nothing to do with you. You're not prepared for it because you come into the post as a head teacher. You're then, because you're the head, and it's always the head that's taken, and I think that's a big issue.
There's something about employment issues that I take very personally. And in terms of resilience, this is something, again, that I'm learning to do, which is distancing what's happening in school and what I am being accused of, and that's I, head teacher, as opposed to me.
Personally.
Yes, and just learning to separate that.
I think you're right. I think the human resources issue of our job is the one that you can never predict how people will behave. I mean, it seems to me there are two kinds of people in our profession, the mature and the immature. And there are those who take it on the chin and say, you're absolutely right, I'll go and sort it out. What do you think? And those people, you think, thank God for those. And then there are those others who take it so personally and off they go and they make a complaint and it's gone completely in the direction. But the one thing I think I've got better at, and I've been, even though I've been in the profession a long time now, is I just think to myself, I'm going to take advice, and I find where I get the best bits of advice, and I always ring, and then I get the advice and I say, I have been professionally advised by, and that, you know, and I work with the unions, I meet with them regularly so that they know where I'm coming from.
Although you're still dealing with your own personal anxiety, because it's actually your member of staff who's accused you of X, Y, or Z, but you've actually got that professional advice.
I find that very, very comforting.
It's not making an immediate decision that's, you know, it's that I need to not react. Teaching, you know, maybe doesn't compare to city salaries, but it's certainly a lot better than I can remember than it used to be.
But I still think there's an issue with head teachers' pay, and particularly female head teachers' pay, and I think there's inequitability. I think male teachers are heads are paid more.
That's right. I think we have to be quite. I think we also have to demonstrate our worth. You know, when we have those meetings with our governors and the external assessor, I think we have to do quite a lot of work to demonstrate what we've achieved, and then to say, what do you think I'm worth in terms of
because male members of my team have no issue about having that discussion with me about their perception of worth. I mean, it's shared, but you know, but equally, I would be hesitant, I think, to raise those issues in such a forceful way with maybe my governors. And I think that's quite interesting, because I'm normally quite forceful about most things. But
apart from your own pay.
Apart from my pay, which I feel slightly uncomfortable about having those discussions.
I think I've got a little better in the last couple of years about being perhaps a little more assertive.
I think, I mean, I'm quite assertive, because when you're a successful female head, you then become headhunted, and then therefore you have something to go to your governors with to say, I've been offered this, will you match it? And of course, if you're a good head and they want to keep you, then they will match your salary.
Retention, aren't you? Yeah.
But I think there are lots of issues around female heads' pay at the moment. As a female head, I think it's really important to think out of the box, take the risks, and not be afraid of taking the risks, because that's how I think you move schools forward, and you move people forward, and you move young people forward, and I think that's very important to remember.
I wake up every morning, I get into the shower, and I think, right, today I'll not know what's going to happen today. It's going to be an exciting day, and I don't think I can remember coming home thinking I had a terrible day today. Most days are something good. It's a fantastic job.
It is. I agree.
And I think it's when you meet students or parents years down the line,
Yeah,
and you don't, your influence on that individual or that family, they've remembered. You haven't, because you deal with so many people, and you remember the key students and so on. But that comment, Miss, you did this in a science lesson, you made a difference in my life, or when you took me aside and you spoke to me about this, Miss, I did what you would advise.
Last year, a boy came into the school and said, could he see myself and another member of staff, and he'd been awful at school, real terrible. And I said, and I went down to the reception, I said, well, what do you want to see? He said, Miss, I just wanted to come in and say thank you, you were right, and I should have behaved myself at school. And for that moment, it was a talking point for ages in the staff room that a boy had come into school and said thank you, because it'd been a nightmare for 5 years. And for that one moment, you just think, this is why I came into the job.
Yeah. This job contributes to my life. I think it's been a privilege and a bonus. So I think it's added to my life. And I would I have to make sure that it adds to my son's life as well. I want him to get the benefits of me being a head, as opposed to it being something that's going to take away from our relationship and also from his life chances.
I feel not dissimilar to yourself, less in terms of privilege, but much more at an individual, very much an intellect, that I've got an enormous amount of intellectual satisfaction out of this job, which was always important to me. I think over and above that is the whole thing for me, that I'm doing something incredibly worthwhile, not in a sort of patronising sense, but in the belief that teachers, schools, education makes a huge difference in people's lives.